Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're plunging into the depths to explore the myth and the science behind the legendary Kraken.
Ooh, Kraken.
Yeah, we'll be using excerpts from this really fascinating scientific paper called The Kraken. When myth encounters science, it's going to be quite a journey.
Sound like it?
So get ready for some seriously fascinating twists and turns as we unravel those ancient sailor tales.
Well, yeah.
And the link between the Kraken and, those classic sea serpent stories.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we'll get to the heart of it all, the actual creature that might be behind all this, the giant squid.
The real deal.
The real deal, Architeuthis. So what I find really captivating about the Kraken is this whole idea of how it embodies our relationship with the unknown.
Yeah.
It's like this blend of primal fear and then this real creature, the giant squid,
Right.
that, scientists are still trying to unlock all its secrets.
Exactly. That push and pull between legend and reality. That's what makes the Kraken so fascinating.
It totally does. Just thinking about those sailors centuries ago, absolutely terrified of this massive beast that could, swallow ships whole.
Oh,
It's pretty wild, just trying to imagine the stories that would have spread. I mean, talk about nightmare fuel.
You can bet those stories got pretty wild, passed down through generations.
Uh-huh.
They painted this picture of the Kraken as this, island-sized monster lurking in those icy waters between Norway and Iceland.
Wow, island size. That's just, I can't even wrap my head around that.
Right. And it wasn't just about the size either. It was the power. Think about those massive arms, those whirlpools that could drag a ship under in an instant.
Like something out of a movie.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And, when you read those old accounts, it's not just about the sheer scale that's terrifying, right? There's something deeper, more primal at play.
I totally get what you mean. It's like, beyond the size, what is it about the Kraken that really creeps people out?
I think it's the fear of the uncontrollable. The ocean already represents the unknown, and then you have this Kraken, this embodiment of chaos that we can't even begin to grasp.
It's that feeling of being totally powerless.
Exactly. Totally at the mercy of this force of nature. And, what's really interesting is the Kraken isn't alone in Nordic folklore.
Right. There are others, what were those names again?
The Hofgufa and the Lengbacher.
Oh, right.
These crazy creatures from the sagas and these old encyclopedias. It's like the Kraken was part of this whole ecosystem of terrifying sea monsters.
It's like the human mind couldn't handle the vastness of the ocean, so it just populated it with these, monstrous beings.
Exactly. And you see that same pattern in other cultures and throughout history, right?
Right.
It's not just a Nordic thing. Think about the Aspidoshalone, that giant turtle mistaken for an island.
I remember reading about that when people would actually land on its back thinking it was solid ground.
And then, boom, down they'd go. Or the bishop fish, another classic sea monster tale. Even the biblical Leviathan. These stories are everywhere.
Like a global tapestry of sea monster mythology. It's really kind of amazing.
Totally. And for the Kraken, that image, that initial, almost incomprehensible beast, it didn't stay that way forever, did it?
No, it didn't. It kind of morphed, didn't it? Like from this unimaginable monster to something more, I guess resembling the giant squid we know today.
Right. So think about it. As humans got better at sailing, ventured further out, started encountering those real giant squid,
Ah, okay.
the image of the Kraken began to shrink.
It had to.
Yeah. The more we learned, the less room there was for this, island-sized creature.
It's like our knowledge kind of reined in those more fantastical elements.
Totally. It went from these shapeless masses, and, some people thought it was like a giant crab or crustacean.
Interesting.
Yeah. But then it gradually shifted towards that giant cephalopod form as people actually saw these massive squid out there.
So it's like the more we explored, the more grounded in reality the Kraken became.
Right. But what's fascinating is that even though the image was changing, those incredible powers, those stories, they stuck around.
Right. Those tales of ships being attacked, dragged under, those stories persisted, didn't they?
They definitely did. And there are even those quirky beliefs, like the idea that amber, the fossilized tree resin, people thought that was actually the Krakens. Well,
That's pretty fun.
That's where amber comes from.
Talk about creative explanations.
It shows you how deeply ingrained the Kraken was in their worldview,
Right. It wasn't just fear. There was this whole mythology built around it.
And, there's this other belief that wherever the Kraken went, it brought these huge schools of fish with it.
Oh, really? I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. So fishermen would they'd risk their lives getting close to this monster, hoping for a massive catch.
Wow, that's
A
crazy.
strange mix of terror and opportunity, right?
It is. Like, they feared it, but they were also drawn to it.
Exactly. It's like this push and pull that just wouldn't quit.
Yeah.
And, the Kraken pops up in art and literature, even way after those early myths.
Oh, yeah.
You have Tennyson, the poet. He wrote this sonnet called The Kraken. And, of course, there's Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Oh, I love that book.
The giant squid attacking the Nautilus. It's classic. Even as the Kraken's image got more defined, that sense of awe and, fear, it never really went away.
It's like this primordial fear embedded in our collective imagination. But you know what I find pretty mind-blowing?
What's that?
The giant squid, the real creature behind all those myths, it was actually known about even before the Kraken legend took hold.
Isn't that wild? Ancient Greek and Roman naturalists, guys like Aristotle and Pliny the Elder, they actually described giant squid centuries before the Kraken.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah, but it was the squid's, its elusiveness, how rare it was,
Yeah.
that allowed it to be kind of like rediscovered and then turned into this mythical beast.
It's like the Kraken legend was like built on top of these ancient observations that had been sort of forgotten.
Yeah, like this echo of something that had already been documented.
It's fascinating how these things get layered over time.
And then, to add to the confusion, people tried to link the Kraken to these other even older sea monsters from mythology.
Yo.
Think Scylla from the Odyssey, the six-headed monster.
Oh, right, right.
Or Cetus, the sea monster sent to punish Andromeda. They even tried to tie it to the Lernaean Hydra, that multi-headed serpent Hercules had to slay.
It's like the Kraken became this ultimate archetype for all sea monsters.
Yeah, like this symbol of the terrifying power of the ocean.
But somebody, at some point, had to try and bring this creature, the giant squid, fully into the realm of, actual science.
Right, and I think that credit goes to Bishop Erik Pontoppidan. He wrote this book called The Natural History of Norway.
Okay.
And it's got this whole detailed account of the Kraken. Let's just say he wasn't afraid to embellish a little.
He was a bit of a showman, wasn't he?
He was, but here's the thing. Amidst all the exaggeration, he actually included some observations about cephalopod behavior that were surprisingly accurate.
Really?
Yeah. So what did Pontoppidan get right? Well, he describes the Kraken darkening the water with, a burst of this inky fluid.
Which we now know is...
the squid's defense mechanism.
Exactly. So he was actually observing real squid behavior.
And there's this other famous story he tells about the Bishop of Nidros.
I think I've heard of this one.
The bishop sailing along, sees this island, decides to hold a church service right there on the island. Turns out it was a sleeping Kraken.
No way.
And of course the Kraken wakes up, chaos ensues.
That's a pretty wild image. I mean, I can see why scientists might have been a little skeptical of Pontoppidan's more imaginative claims.
Oh, there was definitely skepticism, for sure.
Yeah.
But here's where things get interesting. Carl Linnaeus, the guy who came up with the system for classifying organisms, he actually included the Kraken in the first edition of his big, important work, Systema Naturae. He even gave it a scientific name, Microcosmus marinus.
Linnaeus gave the Kraken a scientific name. I can't believe that.
It shows how much the Kraken had permeated, scientific thought at the time.
Yeah.
Of course, Linnaeus later removed it from his classification, probably because, he realized it was based more on myth than hard evidence.
Right.
But that inclusion, even for a short time, it marked a turning point. From then on, the Kraken was basically inseparable from the giant squid in the public and scientific imagination.
So it's like the mythical and the real have finally merged. But how did scientists even begin to study this elusive creature? It's not like you can just head to the local aquarium and find a giant squid on display.
You're telling me? It took a lot of, let's just say patience and a bit of luck.
Right.
The first specimen that was officially studied, it wasn't even a whole squid, it was just a beak, found on a beach in Denmark in 1853.
Just a beak. That's all they had.
Yeah, but you know what? That was enough for this scientist, Japetus Steenstrup, to describe the species. He called it Architeuthis monachus.
Okay.
And with that, the giant squid officially entered the scientific world, finally had its place in the order of things. But if you want a more dramatic encounter, that came in 1861.
Oh, tell me about it.
The French ship Alec Don, they actually harpooned a giant squid off the Canary Islands.
They harpooned it.
Yeah, can you imagine? The crew, they're trying to haul this massive creature on board, but its body just starts breaking apart. They only managed to save a section of the mantle, which is the main body part.
Wow. Still, what a find.
Right. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it gave them some valuable clues about the squid's anatomy.
So every encounter, every piece added to the puzzle, right?
Totally. And there was this period starting 1871 in Newfoundland, Canada, where they found dozens of giant squid washed up on the beaches.
Dozens. What was going on there?
Most likely shifting ocean currents.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. And this is where things get really interesting. Enter Reverend Moses Harvey.
A reverend collecting giant squid. That's not something you hear every day.
Well, he was actually an amateur naturalist.
So like a scientist in his spare time?
Pretty much. He understood how important these strandings were, so he started collecting specimens. There's even a picture of him with a giant squid in his bathtub. It's pretty iconic.
A Victorian-era selfie with a sea monster.
Exactly. But Harvey, being an amateur, he needed someone with real expertise.
Right, someone who could really make sense of it all.
That's where Addison E. Verrill comes in.
Yeah.
He was like the top malacologist, a scientist who studies mollusks at the time.
So, the perfect person for the job.
And based on those Newfoundland squid, he was able to describe a new species, Architeuthis princeps.
So that's another piece of the puzzle.
Verrill was a key figure. He brought Architeuthis back into scientific literature and really pushed for a rigorous approach to studying them.
So he's like the giant squid scientific champion.
I like that. But, with all these new species being described, things got a little messy.
Oh, how so?
Well, there was some, back and forth about the first species that was named Architeuthis monicus. Turned out the original description wasn't detailed enough, so it wasn't considered scientifically valid.
So a bit of a naming fail?
You could say that. And then, with more giant squid being found all over the place, New Zealand, Norway, it became even harder to figure out how to classify them all.
Like trying to organize a giant, messy family reunion.
Exactly. And all this taxonomic confusion has led to this debate about how many actual Architeuthis species exist. Some say 3, some think it's just 1, really variable species.
So it's still a mystery.
It is. And then there's the case of the dwarf Architeuthis.
Dwarf. Like a miniature kraken. How small are we talking?
Think less than 30 centimeters fully grown.
That's tiny compared to, the giants we've been talking about.
Right. It's so different that some scientists think it could even be a new genus.
So, even within the world of giant squid, there are mysteries within mysteries. Now that we have a better understanding of, the history and the challenges of studying Architeuthis, I'm really curious to learn more about its biology and behavior. What have scientists actually been able to figure out about these creatures?
Well, it's kind of like trying to understand how a really complex machine works, but you only have a few scattered parts.
Oh, I see what you mean.
We're still working with a pretty limited understanding because most of what we know comes from, studying dead or dying specimens. It's just a snapshot,
Like trying to figure out lion behavior from a skeleton in a museum. You can see the bones, but not how the animal actually moved and lived.
Exactly. But even with those limitations, we have learned some really fascinating things about Architeuthis biology. For example, they're usually dark red to brown, but like other squid, they can probably change color pretty quickly.
Oh, that makes sense.
Camouflage in the deep sea, that's key.
Right. They need to blend in to both hunt and avoid being hunted.
Exactly. And then, of course, there are those massive eyes.
Yeah, those incredible eyes. It's like they're looking right through you in those photos. What's the story there?
Well, they're definitely the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. But proportionally compared to their body size, they're actually kind of small for a cephalopod.
Oh, really?
Especially one that lives in the deep sea, where light is scarce.
I would have thought they'd need huge eyes to see in all that darkness.
Right. That's what's puzzled scientists for so long. Cephalopods, they rely heavily on vision.
So why the relatively small eyes? It seems counterintuitive.
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
One theory is that their eyes are specifically adapted for picking up bioluminescence.
Ah, the light produced by other creatures in the deep.
Yeah. So they're not necessarily looking for objects, but for flashes of light from prey or predators.
Like a living light show down there.
Exactly. Another possibility is that their eyes play a role in, social interactions, which, to be honest, we know almost nothing about.
It's amazing how something as, seemingly straightforward as eye size can lead to so many questions about these creatures. But what about their movement? Are they as agile and powerful as the Kraken myths suggest?
That's a question that sparked a lot of debate.
Really?
Yeah. Some researchers think Architeuthis are these, strong, fast swimmers capable of chasing down prey and even battling with sperm whales.
Oh, wow.
They point to the muscles in the funnel. That's what they use for jet propulsion.
Yeah.
And they say, look, these muscles are powerful. And the protein levels in their tissues, that suggests they're built for speed.
So they're like the Formula One race cars of the deep?
In a way, yeah. But then you have other researchers who think they might be more like stealthy ambush predators, kind of lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike.
That's a very different picture.
Right. And their argument is that, look, giant squid blood isn't as good at carrying oxygen as, say, a fish or a mammal.
Oh, okay.
So they wouldn't be able to sustain those high-speed chases for very long. They'd run out of steam.
Makes sense. So it's like a speed versus agility debate. Is there any consensus on which side is right?
It might be a bit of both, to be honest. Dr. Aldrich, the guy we mentioned earlier with the wanted posters for giant squid.
Oh, right.
He suggested that Architeuthis could be incredibly fast in short bursts, like a sprinter,
I see.
but not necessarily super agile or maneuverable. Which would make sense, right?
It would.
If they rely on surprise attacks, both to catch prey and avoid becoming prey themselves.
Right. It's all about that burst of speed to catch a meal or escape a sperm whale.
Precisely. But to understand Architeuthis hunting, we need to look at what they eat, their diet.
Oh, good point. So what's on the menu for a giant squid? Do they have a particular taste for sailors by any chance?
You know, despite the myths, sailors aren't really on the menu. Mostly it's other squid and fish,
Makes sense.
which actually fits with both active hunting and ambush strategies.
Right. Both could work.
They've also been found with crustaceans and some other deep-sea creatures.
Interesting. So maybe they're not too picky.
Well, those might just be secondary ingestions.
Mino.
The stuff that was already in the stomachs of the squid they ate.
Oh, I see. Like a deep sea turducken?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for a long time, actually seeing a giant squid hunt, that was like the holy grail of giant squid research.
Yeah, it makes sense. They're so elusive.
But in 2005, a team of Japanese scientists, led by Dr. Tsunemi Kubodera and Dr. Kyuichi Mori,
Okay.
they did it. They captured footage of a live giant squid hunting in its natural habitat.
No way. That must have been incredible.
Oh, absolutely groundbreaking.
Uh-huh.
It was this 8-meter-long giant squid attacking a bait line at like 900 meters depth in the North Pacific.
Wow, that's deep.
They used their tentacles to grab the bait, and the speed was just incredible.
Like something out of a nature documentary.
For real. It was a huge moment in our understanding of Architeuthis.
So they finally caught it on film, the elusive giant squid. But if these squids are such skilled hunters, what about their own predators? We've talked about sperm whales a bit. How does that dynamic work?
Oh, sperm whales, they are the apex predators of the deep.
Right at the top of the food chain.
And they definitely love to snack on giant squid. You can see the scars from the squid's suckers right on the whale's skin, proof of their epic battles.
Wow, those must be some pretty intense encounters. Who usually wins in a showdown like that?
Sperm whales have the size and the power, no contest. A giant squid's tentacles are strong, but they're not built for, like, constricting prey. Their best defense is speed, getting out of dodge.
So it's a classic case of brains versus brawn.
Exactly. There's evidence that giant squid might fight amongst themselves, maybe for food or mates.
Interesting. So it's not just about avoiding the whales.
Right. But at the end of the day, they're no match for a hungry sperm whale. It's all part of the circle of life in the deep.
It's a good reminder that even the most fearsome creatures have their vulnerabilities. But what about the next generation of giant squid? How do these creatures reproduce?
Well, that's another area where we're still pretty much in the dark.
Figuratively and literally.
Yeah. But we do know that the females are a lot bigger than the males. It's called sexual dimorphism.
I've heard of that.
And like other cephalopods, they reproduce using spermatophores, little packets of sperm.
Ah, so it's not exactly a romantic candlelit dinner type of situation.
Not quite. But here's what's interesting. In Architeuthis, those spermatophores are often found embedded in the female's arms.
Wait, in their arms, not like
their teeth.
inside their body.
Yeah, it's pretty unusual. Most cephalopods have a special spot for that, inside the mantle.
So why their arms? Do we know?
That's the big question. It might have something to do with, the challenges of finding a mate in this vast, dark environment.
It's like a biological puzzle within an enigma.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then there's the question of how many offspring they have. We think a female can lay millions of tiny eggs.
Millions. Wow.
Yeah, probably released in these big gelatinous masses, like some other squid species.
So it's a numbers game.
Exactly. And based on the few juvenile squid that have been found, it seems they grow really fast.
So to go from a tiny hatchling to a massive giant squid in just a few years, that's amazing.
It really is. Their biology is just incredible. But here's a question for you. Do you think Architeuthis is the largest squid in the ocean?
Well, I mean, they don't call them giant squid for nothing. But I have a feeling you're about to throw a curveball.
You know me too well. There's another contender for that title. The colossal squid, Mesonicoteuthis hamiltoni.
Wait, there's a colossal squid. Is it bigger than Architeuthis?
Well, based on, the few bits and pieces scientists have found, like beaks and some juvenile specimens, it seems like the colossal squid could be even bigger, both in length and weight.
So Architeuthis might have some competition in the size department.
It might, but even if the colossal squid turns out to be larger, I think Architeuthis will always hold that special place in our imaginations.
I agree. It's the one that inspired the Kraken, after all. It's like this ultimate symbol of the ocean's mysteries. Speaking of the Kraken, do you think that myth has truly faded away? I don't think the Kraken's going anywhere anytime soon.
You're probably right. There's something about sea monsters that just captures our imagination.
Like this primal fascination, right?
Totally. And you'd be surprised how many people are shocked to learn that there's a real creature behind the Kraken myth.
Yeah.
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 And it pops up everywhere in pop culture, movies, books, video games, even music.
So the Kraken has transcended myth and become this pop culture icon?
It definitely has. But, not all of those portrayals have been, beneficial for the giant squid's image.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, there was this novel, Beast, by Peter Benchley. He also wrote Jaws. And in Beast, he depicts the giant squid as this, mindless killing machine.
Oh, no!
Yeah, and there were worries that this would, negatively impact public perception of the giant squid.
Like Jaws did for sharks. Everyone's suddenly terrified of going in the water.
Exactly. People were worried that Beast would lead to, an increase in hunting giant squid.
Oh, that would be awful.
Right. Luckily, that doesn't seem to have happened. Giant squid are so hard to find, and their flesh isn't really considered tasty.
So they're safe, for now, at least. But with all the technology we're developing, who knows, maybe someday it'll be much easier to find and even capture them.
You've got a point. We've got to think about that. As we get better at exploring the deep sea, we have to be really careful not to disrupt these creatures or their environment.
Right. We don't want our curiosity to lead to their decline. But for now, the giant squid remains a symbol of the ocean's mysteries, this incredible reminder that there's still so much out there to discover.
And it's awe-inspiring to think that after centuries of myths and all these decades of scientific study, we're just starting to scratch the surface of understanding Architeuthis.
It really is. And it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From these terrifying myths and legendary sea monsters to scientific discoveries and this quest to understand this real amazing creature.
It has been. And what strikes me is how those two worlds, myth and science, they're often intertwined, especially when it comes to the Kraken.
Yeah, it embodies that connection, doesn't it? A creature born from fear, but also this real animal that keeps pushing our understanding of the natural world.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even in our modern world, there are still creatures out there that can spark wonder and awe in us.
And who knows, maybe lurking somewhere in those unexplored depths, there's something even bigger and more elusive than Architeuthis waiting to be discovered.
Now that's a thought, isn't it? The ocean is vast. We've only explored a tiny fraction of it. Every expedition, every new piece of technology, it opens up the possibility of finding something truly extraordinary.
Well, I think it's time for us to surface from this deep dive. But before we go, I want to thank you for taking us on this incredible journey. It's been a truly fascinating look at myth, science, and the mysteries of the ocean.
It's been my pleasure. And to our listeners, I encourage you to check out the sources we provided and, dive a little deeper into the world of the Kraken and the giant squid.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep that sense of wonder alive.
Yeah, it's like having just a few pieces of a puzzle.
Right.
And trying to figure out this incredibly complex machine.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at with giant squid.
Makes sense.
We're still working with limited information because most of what we know, it comes from those dead or dying specimens.
Right.
So it's just this tiny little glimpse into their lives.
Like imagine trying to understand lion behavior by just looking at a skeleton in a museum.
Exactly.
You see the structure, but you miss the whole,
the behavior.
Yeah, the action, the interactions, all.
Right, you miss all the good stuff.
Exactly. But even with those limitations, we've learned some pretty amazing things about Architeuthis, like their coloration.
Oh, yeah.
So they're usually what, dark red to brown?
Yeah, usually those darker colors, but here's the thing. They can probably change color pretty quickly, like other squid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, camouflage is key down there.
Right.
And it's probably important for communication too, signaling to each other in the dark.
Oh, that's fascinating. I hadn't even thought about that. But what about those massive eyes?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, those are like iconic, right?
The giant squid eyes?
Yeah. When you see pictures of giant squid,
It's like they're staring right through you.
yeah, they're almost otherworldly.
Totally. And they're definitely the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. But here's a little twist. Proportionally, for a cephalopod, they're actually kind of small,
But really,
especially for one that lives in the deep sea.
that's so weird. You think they'd need giant eyes to see in all that darkness.
Right. And cephalopods, they rely heavily on vision, so it's a real head scratcher.
So what's the deal with the relatively small eyes? Any theories?
There are a few ideas floating around. One theory is that their eyes are specially tuned for picking up bioluminescence,
Ah, that makes sense.
the light produced by creatures down there.
Yeah, so instead of looking for shapes, they're looking for, like, flashes of light.
Exactly. Maybe they're tracking bioluminescent prey or keeping an eye out for predators that light up.
That's so cool. It's like a whole different way of seeing the world.
Right. And then there's the possibility that their eyes play a role in social interactions. But to be honest, we know so little about that aspect of their lives.
It's amazing how something like eye size can open up so many questions, right? But speaking of mysteries, what about how they move? Are they as, like, agile and powerful as those Kraken legends make them out to be?
That's a question that's led to a lot of debate among scientists.
Oh, really?
Some researchers think Architeuthis are these super strong, fast swimmers
Okay.
capable of, chasing down prey, maybe even tangling with sperm whales.
Oh, wow. Like the ultimate deep-sea gladiators.
Right. And they look at the muscles in the funnel, which is what they use for jet propulsion.
Okay.
They say, look, these muscles are powerful.
Yeah.
And the protein levels in their tissues suggest they're built for speed.
So they're like the Formula One race cars of the deep sea.
Exactly. But then you have other researchers who think, no, they're more like stealthy ambush predators.
Okay.
Kind of lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.
Oh, that's a completely different image.
Right. And their argument is, look, giant squid blood, it doesn't carry oxygen as efficiently as, say, a fish.
Right.
So they wouldn't be able to keep up those high-speed chases for very long.
They'd tire out.
Exactly. They'd run out of gas.
Yeah.
So it's like this ongoing argument. Speed versus agility.
Is there any kind of consensus on who's right?
It could be a bit of both, to
Right.
be honest. Dr. Aldrich, the guy we mentioned earlier with the wanted posters for giant squid,
Oh, right.
he had this idea that Architeuthis might be super fast, like in short bursts,
I see.
but not necessarily super agile.
Like a sprinter versus a marathon runner.
Yeah, exactly. Each excels in its own way.
Right. But to really get a sense of how Architeuthis hunts, we need to look at their diet, right? What are they actually eating?
You got it. So what's on the menu for a giant squid? Well, contrary to popular belief, sailors are not a staple food.
Huh, good to know.
They mostly eat other squid and fish,
That makes sense.
which actually fits with both hunting styles we talked about.
Right, both active hunting and ambush tactics.
Exactly. But they've also been found with, crustaceans and some other deep-sea creatures in their stomachs.
So maybe they're not too picky.
Well, those might just be secondary ingestions, meaning they were already inside the squid that the giant squid ate.
Oh, right, like a deep-sea turducken.
Exactly. But, for the longest time, actually seeing a giant squid hunt in the wild, that was like the holy grail of giant squid research.
I bet. They're so elusive.
But in 2005, this team of Japanese scientists, led by Dr. Tsunemi Kubadera and Dr. Kiwichi Mori,
Okay.
they actually did it. They filmed a live giant squid hunting.
No.
They got it on camera. It's this amazing moment, this 8-meter-long giant squid attacking a bait line at a depth of 900 meters in the North Pacific.
Wow, so deep.
And the way it used those tentacles, the speed and precision, it was incredible.
I can only imagine. It must have been amazing to see that footage.
It was a huge step forward for, understanding Architeuthis behavior.
Yeah, so they finally caught it on film, the elusive giant squid in action. But if giant squids are such skilled hunters, what about their own predators? We've talked about sperm whales a bit. How does that relationship play out?
Oh, yeah, sperm whales, they're like the top dogs in the deep.
The ultimate predator.
And they absolutely love a good giant squid meal.
I mean, it makes sense. They're huge.
You can actually see the scars from those giant squid suckers right on the whale's skin.
Wow, so those battles really happen.
Oh, yeah. Those are definitely signs of some epic showdowns. But who usually wins? Well, that's pretty clear. Sperm whales have the size and the power.
Yeah, giant squid tentacles are strong, but...
They're not really for, like, crushing or constricting.
Right, more for grabbing and holding.
Exactly. So a giant squid's best bet is to just get out of there as fast as possible.
Makes sense.
There's even evidence that giant squid might fight amongst themselves, maybe for food or mates.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's not just about avoiding the big bad sperm whales.
So even giant squid have their own dramas and rivalries.
It seems so, but at the end of the day, they're just no match for a hungry sperm whale. It's all part of that, delicate balance in the deep sea.
It's a good reminder that even the most fearsome creatures have their own vulnerabilities. But what about the next generation of giant squid? How do these creatures actually reproduce?
That's one of the big mysteries that's still out there, to be honest.
Oh, really?
We're still figuring that out.
I guess it makes sense. They're so hard to observe.
Exactly. But we know a few things. Like the females, they're significantly larger than the males.
Oh, I've heard about that.
It's called sexual dimorphism.
Yeah, it's pretty common in the animal kingdom.
Right. And like other cephalopods, they use spermatophores for reproduction. Those little packets of sperm.
Ah, so no romantic dinners for giant squid.
Not quite. But here's where it gets weird. In Architeuthis, those spermatophores are often found embedded in the female's arms.
Wait, in their arms, not like inside their body.
Yeah, it's strange, right? But most other cephalopods, they have a special spot for that, inside the mantle.
So why the arms? Any theories?
It's a real puzzle.
Yeah.
It might be because, finding a mate in this huge, dark environment isn't easy.
Right.
So maybe this is like a way to make sure the sperm gets where it needs to go.
It's like this biological mystery wrapped in an enigma.
Totally. And then there's the question of, like, how many offspring they have. We think a female can lay millions of tiny eggs.
Millions, wow.
Yeah, and they're probably released in these huge gelatinous masses, kind of like other oceanic squid.
So it's a numbers game, right?
Exactly. Release a ton of eggs, hope a few survive.
Makes sense. And from what we've seen of juvenile squid, it seems like they grow really fast.
Yeah, really fast. They go from these tiny hatchlings to massive giants in just a few years.
That's pretty incredible when you think about it.
It's a testament to their amazing biology. But here's a question for you. Do you think Architeuthis is the largest squid in the ocean?
Well, I mean, they don't call it giant squid for nothing. But I have a feeling you're about to drop some knowledge on me.
You know me too well. There's another contender out there. The colossal squid, Mysonia cateuthis hamiltoni.
Hold on, there's a colossal squid. Is it bigger than Architeuthis?
Based on the few bits and pieces scientists have found, like, beaks and some juvenile specimens, it seems like the colossal squid might actually be bigger, both in terms of length and weight.
Wow, okay, so Architeuthis might have some competition in the size department.
It might. But even if the colossal squid turns out to be larger, I think Architeuthis will always hold this special place in our imagination,
I agree. It's the one that inspired all those Kraken stories.
Exactly. It's like this symbol of the mystery and the power of the ocean.
Totally. So speaking of the Kraken, do you think that myth has really faded away?
I don't think so. Not really. There's something about sea monsters. They just capture our imagination. You'd be surprised how many people I talk to are, like, shocked to learn that the Kraken is based on a real animal.
Oh, really? Like they think it's completely made up?
Totally. And it pops up everywhere in pop culture, movies, books, video games, even music. It's like this icon.
The Kraken has definitely transcended its mythological roots. It's become this pop culture phenomenon.
Right.
But has that been good for the giant squid? I mean, are those portrayals always positive?
That's a good question. And honestly, not all of them have been great for the giant squid's image.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's this novel Beast by Peter Benchley. He's the guy who wrote Jaws,
Oh, yeah.
And in Beast, he portrays the giant squid as this, like, totally mindless killing machine, just wreaking havoc.
Oh, so kind of like what Jaws did for sharks.
Exactly. And there was this worry that Beast would have a similar effect on how people saw giant squid.
Like make everyone terrified of them.
Yeah, and some people thought it might even lead to an increase in, like, hunting giant squid, which would be terrible.
Right, no one wants that.
Luckily, it doesn't seem like that's happened, probably because they're so hard to find and, their flesh isn't exactly a delicacy.
So they're safe for now, at least. But who knows, with all the new technology we're developing, maybe someday it'll be a lot easier to find and even catch them.
That's a good point, and something we need to be mindful of. As we get better at exploring the deep sea, we need to be careful not to disrupt these creatures and their environment. We don't want our curiosity to end up harming them.
It's like this reminder that we have a responsibility to protect these incredible creatures. But for now, the giant squid remains this amazing symbol of the ocean's enduring mysteries, a testament to all that's still out there, waiting to be discovered.
It's true. And, it's awe-inspiring to think that after all these centuries of myths and decades of scientific study, we're really just starting to understand Architeuthis. We've got a long way to go.
It's been an amazing journey, hasn't it? We've gone from these terrifying myths, these legendary sea monsters, to scientific discoveries, and this ongoing quest to understand a real, incredible creature. And it's fascinating how those two worlds, the myth and the science, they're so interconnected, especially when it comes to the Kraken.
Absolutely. The Kraken is like this perfect example of that. It's born from our fear of the unknown, but it's also a real animal that challenges our understanding of the natural world.
It's a reminder that even in our modern, technologically advanced world, there are still creatures out there that can fill us with this sense of wonder and awe. And who knows, maybe somewhere out there in those dark depths we haven't explored yet, there's an even bigger, more elusive creature than Architeuthis, just waiting to be discovered.
A super Kraken, perhaps.
Exactly, a super Kraken. I love it. Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to surface from this deep dive. But before we go, I want to thank you for taking us on this incredible journey. It's been fascinating.
It's been my pleasure, and to all our listeners out there, I encourage you to check out those sources we mentioned and, dive a little deeper into the world of the Kraken and the giant squid. There's so much more to learn.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep that sense of wonder alive.